Yeah, that's probably one of the toughest questions. So I guess ultimately, if you're in the business seat in an organization and you're not seeing the results you want, there's a very good chance that there's something off on the spending. Um, I would honestly say that you could get bad results through either overspending or underspending in IT. Um, Oftentimes, when you're overspending, you make your environment more complicated just because you have a lot of resources going into something doesn't mean that it's providing clarity for your users. You may be giving them duplicate tools. You may have multiple cooks in the kitchen and not getting any results. So you could be overspending and still be getting poor results. Underspending is a little different. Underspending, it probably is going to be big surprises. So you may be, working comfortably and then have, big outages, downtime, cybersecurity incidents. Um, you might have very simple needs to operate your business day to day and not have to spend much money to do that. But at times, there's going to be big um, investments that need to take place to get security in place or to keep systems operational. And those things are probably going to just surprise you. And they're gonna pop up in the form of a downtime incident. So as the business owner, I think in either situation, I think you want clarity as to your position. And if your IT team can't really give you clarity about why you have things the way you have it, or if there's just not enough communication coming out of them, maybe they don't have the skills to really articulate a plan to keep systems operational or to articulate where you are security wise, as there's no scoring methodology or method to say if you're in a good place security wise. If you can't get clarity from your IT leadership about where you stand, you likely have a situation where you're not going to be able to budget very well either. So you might be falling into the overspend or underspend camp. Um, if you have clarity and you know why you're spending money on things and you see the results that you're getting, that's probably where you want to be. And then you'll feel good about the money that's being spent. You'll see the value. You'll see the security score increasing, or you'll see your team working productively, or you'll know, hey, I've got a budget for a new server in 3 years or new workstations in 3 years. You'll know what to expect. Yeah. I think there's two levels of proactive IT. There's proactive IT as in the IT team is talking to the business team and they're understanding the needs of the customer and they're working to anticipate and manage the customer experience so that if the business side of the house needs to improve their turnaround time on closing a contract, that IT is there helping them with an electronic signature, electronic contracting process, and e-commerce process. Um, so that's going to really have impacts in the business. That's really where we want to be. We want to have IT leaders talking with business leaders and solving problems in the business. But there's also proactive IT for the sake of IT. We we want to prevent fires. We want to make sure that equipment isn't run into the ground and just crashes. We want to make sure that systems stay secure, patched, managed to best practices. So I think most IT companies are really selling that latter, where they're just trying to be proactive for the sake of IT operations, just keeping IT operations in place. But we really want to be able to do both. Um, you, of course, that's where the real value is. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned in my time in IT is that it really is all about communication. It's about collaboration. Um, and it's about having a team to look after things. Um, if you're only talking to one IT professional, that might work out okay if you're a really small organization. As things get bigger, usually one person has a area of expertise. And just like in other professions, if you were working in marketing, let's say, if you've got a marketing person who's really strong with print advertising and that's where all of their experience is, you might be missing out on opportunities in other mediums. So IT is just the same way, where if you've got a server person who you're talking to, or maybe an aspiring server person, you're going to get a lot of server solutions. Maybe you don't need that, but that's where they're comfortable. That's where they see their career going. So that they're just going to hit every problem with that hammer. So it's really helpful to have a team approach and to have regular collaboration and communication. Um, and that also means that the people, that are doing the work are communicating with the end users. They're not just um, expected to solve the problems in a vacuum without any end user input. Well, I think in many cases it's, do I need this? What is it doing for me? Um, and it could also be, I thought you were just doing that for us. Um, you know, Many of the systems for a business to get the best results from their technology today, um, the systems are fairly complicated, and the even if it's something like a firewall or an email service that maybe in the past this was just something that the nerds could go into the closet and plug up themselves. It's still going to be like that a little bit, but you're going to get a lot better results if you actually take the time to understand what it's doing. Maybe that does start with questions like, what does this do for me? But also, if you can block out some time with the implementation team to go through the menus on the system that you're buying and see what configurations are possible, you might see in that system, wow, I didn't know my firewall could, you know, give me a temperature sensor or an emergency button or a camera addition. There might be some real valuable services in some of these menus that if you don't take the time to see them, you're just not going to know that what's possible, and you'll probably end up, you know, reinventing the wheel when something comes up that you might have already been paying for in a service that you already have access to. Um, so uh, Having that collaborative approach with IT to understand what you're buying, what its features are, even if you don't choose to implement them all right now, spending a little bit of time to ask those questions and collaborate. Um, I think that that's really the way to go. Well, I mean, that's why we're here, right? Um, so I think what you want to do is you don't want to have to think about the technical nitty-gritty of how to do something. But I think you want to know enough about what IT does for your business to be able to provide direction on how to do it. So, in other words, you want to know how to onboard and offboard a new employee. You want to know, generally speaking, how IT is going to bring somebody onto the organization and how you're going to securely let them go if that were to happen. But you don't have to be an expert in permissions, and you don't have to know as the business leader whether you start that process in Microsoft Intra ID or on the on-prem domain controller. I mean, but you want to know at the end of the day, when I let somebody go around here, my business is going to be secured. And, that's going to take approximately, these steps, and it's a 24-hour process or whatever it is in that environment. You're going to want to know that big picture thing. So yeah, we don't want to have to burden you with, okay, yeah, you always have to right click this box and tap your head twice with the really little details, but you want to know enough about how things work to be effective. Well, I think peace of mind really comes from that collaboration, having that nice balance between um, knowing enough about what's going on that you're not blindsided by anything, um, and but not having to get so down in the weeds that it's really distracting from your operations, and you're having to feel like you're sitting for a cybersecurity exam or something. So I think that, just collaborating with your IT team, clear communication. Oftentimes, this means that we're not working with the most technical person in the organization. We're working with somebody that can be a clear communicator. Oftentimes, the technical people in an organization, they they speak the language of technology. They say, "Oh, we need XYZ technology," and the other technologists interpret that as, oh yeah, that's exactly what the user's expecting. But in the end, the user may be over here with a completely different expectation, and you know, and it's getting lost in translation. So really, that peace of mind is having that direct communication with the technology people that you're expecting to get this work done, telling them what you need from a business standpoint, and letting them come back to you in English about when that's going to be done and how much money it's going to cost. And that's, I think, the best way to do it. This is a great question. It's also, there's two answers to it. Technically speaking, from the Cyber AB governing body, there's three levels. There's level one, which is organizations that just have FCI. There's level two, which are organizations that have CUI. And then there's level three, which would be folks that have sort of super sensitive CUI, the big prime contractors. Um, so that's the answer that the governing body um, trains us all as registered providers, coaches in this space to give. What I find is that really there's very few people with the federal contract information, the FCI. That almost doesn't apply at all. Um, Nobody calls us from Northrop Grumman because they're really big and they already have their own IT teams. So that doesn't really apply at all in our space. And there's really two levels right in the middle. There's people with CUI, and then there's people with export controlled CUI. With the export controlled CUI um, needing to be handled only by US citizens. So there are those two levels right in the middle. And sometimes it's not really clear if a business has export controlled CUI or at some point may want to do work in a space that is export controlled. So we've had people that really aren't in the business of doing any sort of exporting of weapon systems whatsoever, find themselves with export controlled CUI, such as a construction company. These are not companies that are in the business of importing or exporting any goods. They're not manufacturing anything. They're a construction company, and they are dealing with export controlled CUI. Um, so that can take some time and discovery, and it can lead to some very costly mistakes in your compliance program. So that's one thing. As your coach, as your architect of your compliance strategy, I would really want to work with you in the beginning to understand that. And the cyber AB isn't really giving us coaches very good guidance on that real world scenario of export controlled CUI. They're just lumping that right into that middle category. So everybody's sort of out there fending for themselves to figure that out. In the order of magnitude between those two, it's a big cost difference between those two scenarios. Well, I think the most common mistake is, I think the most common mistake, there's a lot of common mistakes with this. Um, so the most common mistake, I think, is that, this is a quick thing that I can buy and put a Band-Aid on this and move forward. I'm not really changing any part of my process. This is just about checking the box, writing a check, and we're done. Not really. It's usually quite a bit of thought and effort and potential operational change in systems, maybe having to retire systems or really modify workflows to meet compliance. It's a big shift. Um, the next most common mistake is, okay, we're going to start this process off. We know exactly the security controls. We're going to run through those security controls and apply them to our system. And then in that scenario, sure, we have applied the security control to the system. Is the system the one that has the critical data in it? Um, we don't know. um, are there three systems that have the same data in it, and we've just applied it to one? Is the data that we have, is it export controlled? And the system that we have isn't actually designed to operate with just US citizens. That system that we've applied the security control perfectly to is actually operated by overseas by third parties. So therefore, all of the work that we just did applying the security control beautifully to this system has been undermined by the fact that it's an overseas system, not suitable for handling this type of data. So those are the problems that we see time and time out with this. And then probably the last one is just the level of documentation needed to sit for an audit. We're not talking about, hey, we've written up our policies, we've all told our employees to work off of company devices, we're done. We actually have to show that we're regularly inspecting these controls, that we're regularly checking the comings and goings in our organization of technology, people, security alerts, working those things out. And we've got to have screenshots or logs or other things demonstrating that we've actually done the things that we said we're going to do. And we have to have those ready for the auditor before we even sit for the audit. So we've got to be able to produce reams and reams of data to the auditor so that they say, yep, you're ready for this. Because guess what? They're not going to actually come out and pull through all of your system and pull this stuff out on their own. They're going to want to be there for a week, charge you 50 grand, get in and out for their week, combing through all this stuff that you've already prepared. And that is a ton of work on top of doing all those other things right. Many of the things that are being asked in compliance are things that you should be doing anyway, like having a process for onboarding users and computers. I mean, you need to do that anyway. But to do that in a compliant fashion in your business, you may not have a ticketing system already. You may not have a checklist already. You may not keep a log when you terminate somebody that you've followed a process to take them out of systems. Um, you should be doing all that stuff, but there's a good chance that there's gaps. So when it comes to compliance, I'm going to give a really big number. But a lot of it is stuff that you should already be paying for anyway. And that's the way the government thinks about it, but that's not the reality with small businesses that are, 15 users, 20 users, even 40 users. There's a lot of gaps out there. So I mean, compliance is easily $300,000. It might be $300,000 every 3 years. I mean, it's a lot of extra overhead to, slow down, document, um, have the right tools and technology. A lot of times those tools and technology are not the ones that you're using today. You're going to have to switch to ones that are capable of handling um, export controlled data or stuff that's only US citizens are supposed to work. So it is a big lift. Um, and some people already have those things in place. So some people maybe it's a lot less. They're mature enough, they've built systems out. They already have ticketing systems, they already have security systems in place, they've already bought the right tools. Maybe for them it's a less of a lift. I mean, it just depends on the business. Yeah, I think you absolutely can. I mean, my hope for any business is to not have any CUI data or any CMMC stuff that they have to deal with. Ideally, you would figure out a way of doing your business without holding any of this controlled and classified data in your systems. If there's any way that you can reduce the scope, you want to make it as simple as possible, and ultimately that's the business leader, can have those conversations with the contracting officer and say, I don't want this data in our systems. So, if the business side of the house can push back on the government and say, I just want to work off of your equipment, the business side of the house can really simplify things. If you can't have the reduction in your scope and you do have to take this on, then yes, we're here to help. You could also hire professional in-house. Um, there a lot of the stuff that has to happen. It is project management or program management. It is documentation. Um, there's space to maybe have a team where some of the more technical things that you scale with an outside party, and you have an inside person that's part-time or full-time, helping with documenting and program management. So there's a lot of different strategies to get you there. You don't have to have an army of IT people. Um, and ultimately, we would coach you to do, touch as little of this data as possible if there's any workarounds. And if you do have to touch it, you want to have it in as few systems as possible. Probably doing some sort of an inventory of systems would help you do your SPRS score. So, having an inventory of your assets, um, having an inventory of your data. So you have your assets and then your data, and then going through and conducting the SPRS score and seeing where that's at. Those would, I think, be three concrete steps. If you're struggling to know where all of your assets are, or to determine if you've applied the controls um, to that asset, then that's where maybe IT expertise could come in and help with that. Um, I also think, you know, having conversations with the partners. So, I mean, that's kind of how you take it on as an IT problem or as a compliance and IT problem. But I think, just being able to talk to the contracting officer, the program manager that you're working under, and really understanding what is coming from that standpoint is also really key.